And you can't make this stuff up. Coming up, this rock band wrote a keyboard instrumental to be the opening music for their live shows. You know, when the band was walking out on stage. Nothing more. But then half the band hated it because it was on keyboard and they were a guitar band. And so they actually shelved the song for 5 years. They almost threw it away. Then they needed a song for their next album. They dusted it off, thinking it would be no more than a filler track, right? It not only became their signature song, it became a stadium rock anthem that would rule our culture. It's still killing it. Coming up next, the story of a song that went from a throwaway to top shelf. Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, back in the day, you hesitated to buy an iPod. You know, music turned digital because you wanted to remain a true audiophile. Listen to it the right way. You're gonna love this channel. I did that for a while, but then I gave up. Make sure to subscribe below right now and click the bell so you never miss out on our daily content. Also, check out our Patreon link below. That's in the description. That helps us to keep this a daily channel. We give you more content. Also, we have our Vintage Years collection. You can get your shirt below. I'm wearing 1971 right now from such an amazing artist, Thomas Estrada. You know, I've had the good fortune of interviewing hundreds of artists. And one of the most interesting takeaways from those conversations is I found that each artist has their own approach for creating music. I mean, there really is no surefire formula for writing a hit song. Many times a song becomes a hit by sheer luck or opportune timing. Sometimes it's a feeling or an inspiration. Some artists need complete freedom or isolation to do their writing. Others feel that they do their best work when they're, under a strict deadline, believing that urgency makes them more focused or more driven. Here on Professor of Rock, we presented many features on some of the biggest surprise hits, whose success even shocked the artists that created them. Sometimes the monster hit is a song on an album that wasn't even meant to be a single at all. Take The Final Countdown by the band Europe, for example. It was a worldwide blockbuster for the Swedish band, but ironically, the guys had no intention of developing the track into a song that would be a candidate to be a single. The sole purpose behind The Final Countdown was just to be a music interlude that kicked off their live concerts, to rev up the fans before they came on stage. The embryo for The Final Countdown was actually a keyboard riff that lead singer Joey Tempest created off of a Korg Polysix, an instrument he borrowed from his bandmate, keyboardist Mick McKelly. The idea to create that riff came from his passion for David Bowie's Space Oddity, actually. This is ground control to Major Tom. It's one of the first records that Tempest bought as a kid, the 45 of Space Oddity. It was the song that actually forged his path to become a musical artist. The sound of that magnificent production, it opened up all the doors for the future of Joey Tempest. For Joey, Space Oddity still ranks as one of the best compositions ever recorded. He cites the imagination that went into that record as being above a normal human level, definitely. Tempest holds Space Oddity in such reverence, he actually placed David Bowie's masterpiece above the music of the Beatles, who were certainly the standard bearer for elaborate experimental music in the late 60s. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? When Europe formed in 1978, they actually called themselves Force. And Joey Tempest was still going by his real name, Joachim Larsson. He changed his name to Tempest after seeing the title of the Shakespeare play in a book of playwrights at school library. Now, during their first 3 years as a unit, they weren't living up to their name. They weren't much of a force. I mean, the group got its big break in 1982 when they changed their name to Europe. And they won the first Swedish Rock Championships, which was a national contest for emerging rock bands called Rock SM. The Rock SM competition was wildly popular throughout Scandinavia. 4,000 bands entered the contest. Can you imagine? In addition to Europe winning the overall competition as best band, Joey Tempest was voted best lead singer, John Norum as best guitarist, and the band was awarded a record deal with Stockholm-based Hot. In 1985, Europe was working on material for their third studio album. They already had the meat of the album, with tracks like the power ballad Carrie. There was On the Loose and Rock the Night, which had already scored as their first hit in Sweden. It went all the way up to number 4. Now, the band believed it was their time for an international breakout. That meant making a really great album and ramping up their live show. Everything just needed to be bigger. They wanted something, really grand to elicit crowd excitement going into that. Tempest went back to that keyboard riff that he had created 5 years earlier. Joey always felt the music had a really theatrical vibe to it, like the score from a dramatic action-adventure film. Bassist John Levin, he loved Tempest's music track, and he suggested that Joey write lyrics for the song. Tempest rekindled his love for Space Oddity, actually, and came up with song lyrics about leaving ground and headed for Venus. I don't think Tempest cared that the average surface temperature on Venus is like 847 degrees Fahrenheit and the planet is uninhabitable. When he wrote that line, however, Venus is named after the Roman goddess of love and beauty, so there is an element of romantic adventure with the idea of flying a spacecraft to Venus. And still we stand tall. We give Joey all the poetic license he needs there. Now, as we continue this breakdown of this classic radio hit, so the band Europe was split down the middle when Tempest played the demo of the Final Countdown after he added, vocal and lyrics to this splashy music track. 3 of the 6 band members thought it was great, but the other half thought it was too much of a departure for a rock band. John Norum had the biggest issue with the song. He didn't care for the heavy synth sound of the track. Now, Tempest fought hard for the Final Countdown to be recorded, and he pushed for it to be the first cut and the title track for the new album. The band eventually united on including the song in the Final Countdown. Not only became the title track for the record, it was shaping up to be a stirring rock anthem. Epic Records, the US label for Europe, wanted the Final Countdown to feature, a modern synth sound that was really hot during that time in the mid-'80s. So they actually teamed the band with producer Kevin Elson, who had a great success in crafting Journey's Frontiers LP in '83 that just happened, and that, of course, sold 6 million units. He wanted that sound. On the recording of the Final Countdown, Tempest's keyboard riff was performed by Mick McKelly on a Yamaha TX816 rack unit and a Roland JX8P synthesizer to make Norum feel better about the track, maintaining some kind of rock integrity. The talented lead guitarist added a really tasty solo for that middle 8. Now, Tempest admitted he could hear a little influence from the band UFO in the recording of the Final Countdown. As well as the galloping intensity of this Iron Maiden song. Always felt to me, it sounded quite a lot like a song that we recently covered from supergroup Asia, Only Time Will Tell. It was a number 17 hit for them in '82. However, Tempest had come up with the intro before the Asia hit was released, so it's just one of those moments where 2 creators had similar idea at the same time. Actually happens a lot more often than we realize. When it was fully recorded and mixed, the Final Countdown had all the elements of a big song that screamed out to the radio, at least to everyone but the band. The band was hell-bent on leading with Rock the Night, but the label had other ideas. Executives at Epic wanted the Final Countdown to launch the new album and relied on Tempest to convince his band brothers. So Joey huddled with the group and reinforced that they should embrace the label's enthusiasm, to make the Final Countdown that first single. If the track becomes a solid hit, it would be the grandiose opener that supercharges their upcoming tour. That's exactly what the band was looking for. The band came together and the Final Countdown was actually released on Valentine's Day in 1986. Now, the naysayers in the group were so glad that they were wrong about the Final Countdown's hit potential. Europe really couldn't have scripted it any better. The Final Countdown was an immediate smash and it exhilarated audiences. Final Countdown shot to #1 in 25 countries, including the UK, where it held that top spot for 2 weeks. Now, the single wasn't as successful in America on the charts as it was in the rest of the world. It peaked at #8 on the Billboard Hot 100, also went to #18 on the Album Rock Tracks chart. But listen, it's been huge, much bigger than its chart position since. Tempest's iconic synth riff has been used as the theme song for many sports teams. There was the Detroit Pistons during their Bad Boys era, when the franchise won back-to-back NBA championships in 89 and 90. This song was born to be a stadium rock anthem. I've heard it at so many sporting events. It's right there with AC/DC's Thunderstruck and Queen's We Will Rock You. I hear it all the time. Now, in 2015, the members of Europe appeared in a TV commercial for Geico Insurance where the band performed the Final Countdown in a simulated office break room while a worker is waiting for his burrito to finish heating up in a microwave. At the end of the spot, the voiceover announcer delivers the tag link.
If you're the band Europe, you love a Final Countdown. It's what you do.
I love that. It's what you do. It was also used to great effect for Job in Arrested Development. Simply hilarious. And it's been used in so many movies and TV shows. We'd be here all day if we talked about each one. Some of the highlights include Hot Rod, Top Gear, Pitch Perfect, Chuck, and The Rocker. Again, that's just to name a couple. I remember playing this song on my boombox when me and my friends were doing some pro wrestling on the trampoline. Did you guys ever do that? Man, whenever I used my boombox outside when we were doing things, it seemed like it took about 50 Energizer D batteries to make it work, and it only lasted like 2 hours. My mom would get so ticked off that I used all the batteries that we had in storage, that we had in the house. So I had the bright idea at that point of slinging together about 8 extension cords from being plugged in from our deck all the way out to the trampoline, which was out in the field, which I'm sure was a fire hazard, but I didn't care. Look, we wanted to get pumped up so that we could, choreograph or mimic the moves of Andre the Giant or the Junkyard Dog or Hulk Hogan as we body slammed each other into oblivion. We also had karate championships a la Karate Kid, choreographed perfectly to a blasting Europe's The Final Countdown. There was also Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet. Man, do I miss the 80s. We had such a great childhood. The music video, it always came on MTV, and every time it did, it motivated me and my friends to grab the boombox and just go out and have that rumble on the trampoline. Speaking of trampolines, what's with this netting around all the tramps today. That's what we called it, a tramp. I don't know if you did too. I think having a net's pretty dumb. We never had one. If you got body slammed off the tramp, you probably broke your arm, but mostly you just got back up and you shook it off and you got back on the tramp, which reminds me of about 15 other stories about injuries from riding our BMX bikes or swinging from a tree into the canal. Those were the days. No rules, man. I find it interesting that Europe is constantly labeled as a one-hit wonder. I've seen that reference a lot of times. It's just simply not accurate. With 11 studio albums to their credit, Europe actually has had 7 top 10 singles in Sweden, 6 top 40 singles in the UK, and actually 4 top 40 singles in the US. Final Countdown wasn't even their biggest hit in the United States. That honor went to the power ballad that I mentioned before, Carrie, co-written by Tempest and McKelly. That went all the way to number 3 as the 3rd single from the Final Countdown. I mean, I remember watching the video to their song Cherokee, which was just outside of the top 40 if memory serves. But it gave me a great history lesson. I remember looking up the events in our World Book encyclopedias because of that song. In search of gold, make the nation bleed. So in the rock era, there have been several uber-talented record executives who seem to have, like they call it, golden ears when it comes to hearing hits, like Ahmet Ertegun, Berry Gordy, David Geffen, Clive Davis. But even those legends had their strikeouts. No one bats 1,000. There are no all-knowing oracles in the music business. Oftentimes it boils down to a fortuitous timing for a song to get its chance for the public to decide. Joey Tempest's irresistible keyboard riff could have easily remained concealed on some random tape recording. He tucked it away for 5 years. He brought it out at the right time. He could have forgotten about it. And yet, it still had to circumvent band bureaucracy for the group he co-founded to record it, and then to turn it into a global hit. The Final Countdown by Europe is another interesting tale of timing, opportunity, and really gut instinct that makes music such a fascinating, unpredictable art form. Leave us a comment about this 80s classic. What are your memories of Europe's The Final Countdown? Did you ever do pro wrestling on the trampoline? I know you had to. It's not just an Idaho thing. What are your memories of growing up in the good old 80s? I'd love to see them in the comments. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below to be a permanent part of our community. Take a look at our merch below. You're going to love this Vintage Years collection. It's really cool. Check it out. Help us keep the music alive. That's what it's about. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.